by for Wyoming Hookin Huntin Outdoors with your host, Drew Kirby.
Hey, this is Luke Holmes.
I am Morgan Wallen.
I'm Riley Green.
I'm Travis Denning.
Hey, I'm Aaron Lewis.
Hey, it's Luke Bryan.
I'm Tim McGraw.
What's up? This is Ian Munsick.
Wyoming Hookin Huntin Outdoors.
It's Wyoming Hookin Huntin Outdoors. One of our favorite times of the year is finally here. Obviously, summer is starting to wind down. And Janet, I've seen a lot of folks getting geared up to head out on their hunts this year.
Oh, you know, fall is such a great time in Wyoming for many reasons. It is just so fun to be out. And I think a lot of the seasons that are starting to open, namely archery, you know, the season is thoroughly enjoyed by all of our archer hunters. And like you said, though, it is time to start getting ready, do some practicing, make sure you have all the appropriate licenses and you're ready to get out there and enjoy the hunt.
August 15th is when archery season opens for Antelope and Bryan. It's a great time to have everything organized and ready to go so that you're not waiting until the last minute.
If you're not in the mood for hunting, you will be now, because some of your friends are going to go out there and do their archery hunting for antelope, but also do the scouting and all that kind of stuff that they love to do. Just all those reminders about getting your equipment ready. Maybe it's a good time to sight in your rifle. Maybe it's a good time to start practicing with your bow before you actually go out bow hunting. Make sure you get your arrows all set up and balanced and all that kind of stuff. And like I say, if you're out there scouting and stuff, make sure you're on public land. And if you're going to hunt on or scout on private land, make sure you have permission to be on that too. So just a lot of different things that are coming up now. And if you haven't thought about getting ready, now is kind of probably a good time to start.
Obviously, one of the important parts is having your license, having your access, permission, and having it all together so that, A, you're not scrambling, and B, you know what you're doing.
That's the easy stuff, right? You get permission and you get written permission from the landowner if you are on private land. Pretty easy, simple, get a signature that says, yes, I gave you permission to hunt antelope on my property for 2023. Not a difficult thing to do, but people often forget to get that. So don't forget it. There's also instructions on how to fill out a carcass coupon. So make sure that you correctly notch that at the site of the kill. It's not something that you can do when you get home a little bit later. You know, if you are lucky and you harvest an animal, make sure that you fill that out. You notch the date, you sign it, and do it appropriately, because those are some of the top 10 hunting violations right there. And it's not difficult to do.
Drew, probably the other thing is a good time to maybe take your license out of the envelope. I know you've got all antelope are limited quota licenses. I don't think we had very many left over. So everybody got them in the mail. So it's a good time to open that envelope and look at the hunt area that you actually drew. There's one part in the upper left-hand corner of the license that you have to sign to make it valid. And then you're ready to hunt. The bottom part, of course, is the carcass coupon that Janet was talking about. In the upper right-hand corner is the landowner coupon. So it's one of those things where make sure you read through all that kind of stuff. Make sure that you know what day your hunting season opens this year. Remember that some of the licenses were cut because of the bad winter, and maybe some season dates changed too because of that also. So now is a good time to open up all those regulations and things like that. And if you're looking for a regulation, you don't want to do it online, you can stop by the Game and Fish office or give us a call. We might even mail them to you if you would like one. So because we do have those regulations in printed form this year, and last year we didn't get them till later. So that's one part of getting ready for hunting that we just don't really think about.
Obviously, having knowledge of where you're hunting is important. It's an important part. You just mentioned to make sure you know your hunt area and, make sure that it's right on your license. What happens in a situation where if you're hunting in one hunt area and you cross the line into another, say elk, you're hunting Area 7 and you cross over into Area 19. What kind of a situation does that turn into for you if you happen to harvest an animal in the wrong area?
I mean, that's a good analogy because, that's part of getting ready for the hunting season and knowing your boundaries. So if you have a hunt Area 7 elk license, you're not allowed to hunt in Area 19. If you wound one and it goes across there, I mean, you can certainly pursue that as long as like you're on public land or if you have permission, things like that to retrieve that game. But if you happen to harvest that animal in the wrong area, it really comes down to your ethics and, letting us know that that's what happened is probably the best thing to do. But like I say, it's one of those things where you need to prepare for that before it happens and make sure that you're not put in a situation where it puts you where you're in the wrong area after you've harvested an animal.
When people are, and I know, Janet, we talk about ethics a lot. What are some ideas that or thoughts that people need to kind of keep in their mind when they are out archery hunting? I mean, because you're not looking for the blaze orange. Things are a little bit different between archery and rifle.
One of the big things is knowing your own boundaries as far as your own strengths and weaknesses and really recognizing those. That there's a lot of folks out there that don't enjoy archery hunters because they feel like the wounded loss of the animals that people shoot at is much greater than, say, using a rifle. And so I think to help mitigate a lot of that is knowing your own strengths and weaknesses and using your ethics to make good, clean shots. I mean, it can be very exhilarating to, stalk an animal and get so close, and whether you choose to just watch it at that point or if you choose to harvest it, those all come into your own personal ethics. But I think more than anything, self-awareness is a pretty big picture there for archery hunters.
Brian, is the process of harvesting archery or harvesting rifle any different, or is the process exactly the same?
No, everything's the same. I mean, first off, you're really excited and all that kind of stuff. It's a time when people really forget what they need to do, after they have an animal down, especially archery hunting. So archery hunting is a lot more challenging. Success rates are a lot lower. So, harvesting something with your archery equipment is a really big deal. So taking that carcass coupon off, signing it and not take cut out the notches for the date that you harvested. So you have all that done. And then you get into the process of, field dressing it, getting the skin off, the hide off, and actually getting it cooled off, because it is pretty warm weather right now, and getting that cooled off so you don't have, wasting that meat. So one of the other things that you think about being prepared is if you're hunting when it's these kind of temperatures that we have now, in the morning, it might be cool, but boy, if you harvest something, it doesn't take long for things can spoil. So you can actually get that animal out of the field and get it cooled down right away, which I think is extremely important during the archery season this early in the year.
We talk about antelope archery starts on the 15th of August, then 2 weeks later on September 1st. In some areas, some days, some areas it's September 15th. That's when elk archery opens up. And then you get to October, and that's when rifle season opens up for a lot of these. If I have a rifle-only license, but I want to use my compound bow, can I do that in rifle season?
Oh, that's a good question. So yes, you can use your archery equipment during the rifle season, but then you have to remember that during the rifle season, you have to have fluorescent orange on. So that is the difference. And like say, when you're hunting during the archery season, not only do you need your license, but you also need to buy a archery permit. So you can buy that over the counter, you can buy it online, and they even have a lifetime archery license now too. So make sure you get that during the archery season. So your license is good for hunting during the rifle season and during the archery season. So you need to, unless you have a special license that only permits you to hunt during the archery season, Drew, because some of those areas like for elk are archery only. The closest ones around here are in the bighorns, and they're highly sought after licenses. So for those, you're only going to be able to hunt during the archery season. But for the majority of the folks out there, you can do both.
I also want to remind folks about the hunter orange or hunter fluorescent pink requirements. So as an archery hunter during archery season, you do not need to wear those. But if you are heading out during a rifle season, you do need to have that on. Being safe is always a big part of it. But don't forget, law versus not during the different seasons.
How much orange do you actually have to have? You mentioned just a hat. Is that perfect, or do you need a hat and a vest or a vest?
It's a hat, a vest, or a coat. And it can be of fluorescent orange or fluorescent pink, and it can be in camo fluorescent orange or fluorescent pink. So it's or. So one of those items of clothing you have to wear during the rifle season.
And Brian, very quickly before we let you guys go today, what about crossbows? Can they be used in archery and rifle season?
Yes, that's correct. Crossbow is considered archery equipment. So if you're going to hunt during the archery season, you have to have an archery permit for that. So in Wyoming, it's considered archery equipment. So the same if you're going to use it during the rifle season, you would need to wear fluorescent orange or pink when you're hunting with a crossbow during the rifle season.
Well, obviously, you can go to wgfd.wyo.gov, find out about the proper times when your seasons come in, just so you don't get confused, because a lot of different areas and a lot of different start dates.
A lot of changes this year, thanks to the winter of 2020.
It's Wyoming Hookin and Huntin Outdoors.
Hey, it's Drew and Brian at Rocky Mountain Discount Sports. And Brian, we're to a point now where summer is here a day and it's gone a day, but we've been getting a lot of rain, and we've been talking about that for 2 or 3 months now, where kind of an odd year, but doesn't mean that you can't get out and do things in the outdoors.
Yeah, it's kind of early, but it kind of feels like fall. We had a little bit cooler weather. We're not hitting those 90 and 100 degree temperatures, and boy, it just makes a guy think that those elk are going to start screaming here pretty soon, and before long, we're all going to be out in the field chasing critters.
Yeah, I was just talking to someone the other day talking about getting ready to go on an antelope hunt. Mm-hmm. They do it every year. It's kind of a family ordeal, and you want to make sure that you guys are all prepared. You don't want to get everybody out there and be missing something.
Yeah, in this part of the country, down, I think, Platte County's even got an early elk season on private ground. I think it's cow only, but, August 15th starts a lot of our archery antelope, and then even some rifle elk in private land.
So we're talking just literally a few days before we get this puppy underway. And
right.
So if you're going to go out and do a long trip, if you're going in the backcountry, you're going to do a long hunt, you got to have every supply you can think of that you can haul.
Right.
And obviously things are getting smaller as time goes by, because the way that they've figured out technology and started working on some different patterns and materials. So coming into Rocky Mountain Discount Sports, really a good idea to see what's the latest and greatest is when it comes to that backcountry camping.
Yeah, and we've been talking about this for a while, but, obviously a good pair of boots, good pair of socks. Look at the packs where, we've got all the Mystery Ranch, we've got Badlands, we're bringing in Stone Glacier, should be here any day. Then if you start looking at your food and water sources, Life Straws, you got Jet Boils, you got your Mountain House foods, you got Peak Refuel. There's a lot of that stuff that, a person kind of just wants to kind of prep and be ready for, to make sure that you can spend that quality time in the field and not have to, worry about whether it's going to rain or where my next meal is coming from.
Last weekend, obviously, a bear trap happened up on Casper Mountain, and rain and slop and mess. What kind of boots should you really look at if you're going to go out and be in the elements?
I still kind of like a lightweight, Danner, whether you go with like one of their, I guess, hybrids. It's kind of got the leather and the nylon, or if you just go with the straight nylon. The leather boots obviously offer you a little more protection. You can get those waterproofed pretty well. But, a lot of times, those boots have some insulation. And then for the early part of the season, we don't necessarily need insulation because we're always on the move. So you got to have a couple different pairs, and kind of depending on the weather. I like wearing a nice pair of Danner leather boots. They seem pretty versatile year round. I do a lightweight, like a 400-gram insulation on them. My feet don't tend to get too hot, and wearing a good pair of socks that wicks away the moisture gives you a nice, comfortable, good ankle support. That's just kind of the way I go, but I mean, everybody's a little bit different there.
When you go into a situation like that, say you're at the Southern Bighorns and you're just glassing a long way, and you know that you're not going to be staying in, so you get a day pack. What are you carrying in that pack just to kind of make sure that you're taken care of for the day?
I usually carry, obviously, a knife, my rangefinder, my binoculars. I carry kind of an emergency, like, fire starting kit. I might carry a lightweight tarp. I carry quite a bit of paracord so that if I'm trying to gut an animal by myself, I can spread the legs, hopefully, and get them spread out. Sometimes those are pretty hard to kind of hold. Game bags, flashlight in case you get stuck out there. Maybe a headlamp is always helpful, especially if you're going in dark or coming out dark. I do pack water in, but it's nice to have the life straw in case you're there for a day or two and you need to replenish that Camelback. Sometimes I'll carry some marking tape, extra shells. I mean, kind of go through the gamut and then start weeding out what maybe you don't need.
Right. Well, and that's one of the important things about being prepared. It's not a great idea to just jump in the truck and go and not even think about it. And that's what the benefit of coming into Rocky Mountain Discount Sports is. If you don't have an idea of what to put in that pack, then you guys have shelves and shelves lined with those items that you're going to need.
I've kind of whittled down, even like from a knife standpoint. A lot of times we used to always carry in a knife sharpener. Well, anymore with the Outdoor Edge or the Havalon knives, they've all got replaceable blades. They can obviously be resharpened, but when you've got a sheath that's got a knife with a couple extra blades on it, you're set. So now you've cut back on whether or not you need a knife sharpener.
One of the things that is always a good idea is to get your pack, put what you're going to use in it or what you want to have in it, and wear it around.
Right.
You got to know exactly how the feel is.
Funny story is when I first moved into the neighborhood that I'm at, a package got misdelivered to one of my neighbor's houses. So I'm knocking on doors. Hey, did you happen to get this package? And my neighbor answered the door, and he's carrying, it's about this time of year, he's carrying a pack on his back. He's sweating down as he opens his door up. I'm like, what in the world are you doing? He goes, getting ready for elk season. I got my pack loaded and I'm going up and down my stairs, and just getting his knees and body in shape. And he's the type of guy that hunts the back country, the hoebacks, and he's packing in for multiple days. So he was just kind of getting in shape, and I'm not going to say it was a bad idea. I'm not going to do it. But, making sure that, things fit properly, even on packs. When you get the right pack and you can, get the right belt size and where it's taking some of that weight off your shoulders, makes a huge difference.
We've been talking about packs and being ready and, making sure that you have what you need. If you don't know, come into Rocky Mountain Discount Sports and they'll get you hooked up.
It's Wyoming Hookin Huntin Outdoors.
Welcome back. It's Drew and Brian here at Rocky Mountain Discount Sports. And Brian, we talked a lot about hunting right there. We're to that point. But you can't forget fishing. We're still in August, so the summer fish is still happening.
Summer is eventually going to be here. I promise you, it'll eventually be here.
It's funny. One of the first things that you ever said to me was, "You can never let the weather predict what you're going to do." When you can't predict the weather, that's a good philosophy to have, because this craziness, the afternoon thunderstorms, kind of coming in and rolling in. You can see it coming from a long way away, and I think it's deterring a lot of people from...
Yeah, and a person just has to be prepared and has to, not be dumb, right? I mean, when you see that thunderstorm coming through, it's best to get off the lake. I talked to a guy a couple of weeks ago that had a real near fatal accident up at Pathfinder. He's in a smaller boat and a lower profile boat, and the water came up over the back end of the boat and couldn't get the plugs pulled, and ended up, just basically capsizing it. I mean, was able to get himself off, but pretty scary situations, especially on some of those bigger bodies of water like Pathfinder, where when the wind kicks up, that thing starts rolling pretty good. And I've seen 6-7 footers out there, and that's no joke. I mean, you best to, if you can't get off the water, get to shore in a non-windy side and just beach it and hope it settles down in a couple hours.
Yeah, it definitely is frightening to be out on the water when you're in that situation. But, you, again, can't let it deter you of the thought of that. And
right.
When I was up at Pathfinder a couple of weeks ago, we kind of went around and toured a lot of the lake and just kind of checked it out. And there's a lot of lake that a lot of people may not even go back and adventure to, that means there's a lot of fishing that's still out there that's maybe unmanned.
Yeah, the Pathfinder, I don't know, it's like the second biggest body of water in the state, and there's a lot to see. There's a lot to do. There's lots of ways to fish that lake. From the marina, I mean, it's about a 20-mile boat ride straight up to like the Miracle Mile, and when you can get up to that river, through that river channel, it's a lot of lake. It's not quite as high as to kind of get you there now. But with a big boat, you can. I think it's right at 20 miles.
That means there's a lot of fish to catch there too.
This next year ought to produce some really good quality fish, especially if they keep getting water put into it. When that water comes up and the forage and the starts growing and has more places for bugs and little fish to hide. Guys are catching fish now. I mean, if you just want to go out to Pathfinder and just catch fish, it's great for the kids. I mean, there's a lot of small fish, and we've seen I'll come across Facebook a couple times where there's been a couple 32-inch fish caught. So
yeah, so get out and check out Pathfinder's great. Alcova, that's a fun lake to go out on because you can catch a variety of different fish, and obviously the river runs right through Casper, and then we get to Glendo where the water's still going down pretty quickly. Mm-hmm. I think they're trying to go for just a little bit more and then maybe hold it steady.
This is that time of year where Nebraska starts calling for water to start irrigating, and it's pretty dry. The further east you go. We were talking just the other night that the Casper Mountain hasn't looked this green in August for a number of years.
So we know that it's a difficult bite. What are you going out with when you're hitting the water? Let's say you're starting at 7 o'clock in the morning. How are you fishing that?
Well, I tend to fish how I like to fish, which, is usually putting a jig in my hand and trying to catch them, on some type of a jig presentation. And I talked to some guys up at Alcova that have been really good with just a jig and a minnow. That's kind of interesting to me this late in the year. Everything seems late, yet at the same time, with as much water has dropped down, the troll bite has been pretty good for guys. And then I've been catching quite a few on spoons and jigging wraps.
The change in fishing that we've talked about all spring and then early part of what we're calling summer, is finally here that we thought it was going to be a month ago that was going to be.
Yeah, I think with natural lakes, which, we don't have a whole lot of, in off our Platte system, but the natural lakes tend to fish more patterns based on time of year and water temperature. Reservoirs, because of how much they fluctuate in elevation, they tend to fish more based on how the water level is, as to more so than what the temperature is. So when the water's high, again, we tend to fish a lot more shallow, and I think there's still fish shallow in those reservoirs that have a lot of weeds, like Glendo. We're focusing more on the sandy beaches, some of the main lake points, and then just some of the basin kind of stuff. Pathfinder, same way. A lot of sand, water's holding pretty good elevation-wise, but now the troll bite tends to kick in because you can cover a little bit more water and search for those big fish.
So this week, obviously, is kind of a relax and get ready for the big week next week with the Wyoming Walleye Stampede, where you'll go to another lake, which is Boysen, and that's going to be different because the water levels there are not like they are in Glendo either.
Nope. So that Boysen's is our championship, our fourth stop of the year, and our last one, the big hurrah, and. Yeah, they still got a bunch of water going in there. It was flooded up into, 15, 20% and taking out campgrounds and all kinds of stuff. And they got it back down to 100%. Then they started getting a bunch of rain. The lake was starting to settle out and starting to kind of calm down a little bit. And then with all this rain, all those small streams and tributaries that were feeding back in there muddied the darn thing back up. I think this next week we'll start seeing hopefully the weather patterns calming down a little bit, maybe a little bit less rain. Hopefully the mud lines, kind of settle down and everybody can kind of get back to fishing a little bit more of the lake than what they're doing now.
The weather's saying that we may have a couple of dry weeks that will play a big part of that. But as the dry comes in, the heat comes right with it. So then you don't want to stress the fish out again, which normally we're not talking about that in August. It's usually a June, July. So it really is just kind of a whacked out year.
Yeah, fortunately for our tournaments with the walleyes, it's a catch and release photo deal. So the fish really don't get stressed very much. They're not put in live wells. They're really not handled too much. They get put on a board. They get measured. We take a trophy picture and we send them off. So normally a fish is out of the water less than a minute. So that part's good. The trout definitely are a little more susceptible to that hot water and the warmer waters. They definitely like the cold. So even like at Alcova, people are catching those trout down, 25 to 40 foot under the surface because that's where the cooler water is at.
So it's a wild time, but a fun time. Make sure you get out and enjoy it. And if you need equipment, stop in here to Rocky Mountain Discount Sports.
It's Wyoming Hookin and Huntin Outdoors.
It's Wyoming Hookin and Huntin Outdoors. Hey there, it's Drew, and this week we're getting back into the mindset of tactical training. And Mike from Cutting Edge Tactics and Training is here in studio. Earlier this past week, Mike, you and I went out to Stuckenhoff's, and you ran me through the ringer on a lot of basic tactics when it comes to not only combat situations, but conceal and carry and using that handgun. And I appreciate you being back on the show. We had you just a couple of weeks, and after being with you for a couple of hours, it really is informative.
Well, I thank you for having me back on, and it was awesome to head to the range with you and be able to kind of give you some of the basic courses and show you what we do here at Cutting Edge so you can inform your viewers more. But I love I love training people. And so anytime I get somebody out to the range, it's fantastic. It was great having you there. I love the fact that within just a short few hours, your shooting was improved. Your mindset is changing. You're looking at things from a different perspective, which is really, that's what I want to do here. Not only train people, but also give them a tactical mindset so that should the need arise, they can step up to become the defender of their family and community, but they can also do it in a way where they're considering all different aspects and all different avenues instead of just like, oh, I'm going to just pull my gun and shoot. And it's like, well, there's a lot more to it than that. And really, that should be your last resort.
Your background, I mean, people think, oh, you probably learned this on YouTube or whatever, but you really have a military background. You're in the Marines for a number of years, and really you haven't stopped your training since, probably boot camp, right?
Yeah, and so, like you said, I joined the Marine Corps, and I was in the infantry, did 2 combat deployments in the Middle East, and then did private security training, and then private security afterwards. And then when I came out here, I started the company. And like you said, I still get training, right? So the company is called Cutting Edge for 2 reasons. One, it's a homage to the unit I was in the Marine Corps, which is 3rd Battalion, 7th Marines. And our nickname was the Cutting Edge. And also, it's because I want this company to be on the cutting edge of training and of tactics. That's why I am constantly seeking out training. So I'm always putting up my own money to go to training courses. So when I come back, I can give my students the very best training. And so I'm always bettering myself. And it's something I encourage, my students to do is if you've come through one training course, great. Now do the next one. Push yourself. Because being a defender of your family and your community, should the need arise, that takes years of training. In order to properly defend yourself, you need to be ready for it. And it's hard to do that if you go to the range once a month, right? And you're not actually seeking out training and getting any other training. And I think that through the conversations we had during the training, not just like, oh, here's how you properly hold the handgun, here's how you properly hold an AR, but also the mindset stuff we talked about during that training, I think is important because it opened your eyes a lot more to different aspects of, let's say, concealed carry versus open carry and firearm selection for, whatever you're going to use it for.
One thing that I notice a lot of times is you see the videos online all the time of a good guy with a gun stopping a bad situation. Mm-hmm. Not all of those stoppages are done properly, and you could tell that the person probably hasn't ever done that before, but they had a gun, so they pulled it out, and things could have gone really wrong because they weren't trained properly. Mm-hmm. But then you watch the videos where maybe you have an ex-police officer or a former military person that has that training where they do everything right. They approach and address the perpetrator properly. And, with what we learned yesterday in just that couple of hours, I feel more confident that I would have a better understanding going into that situation.
Yeah, and I agree with you. There's something to be said for if you are going to choose to carry a firearm and, again, in case the situation arises where you need to defend yourself, I would advocate you are properly trained for that. and you understand the consequences of that situation and you know what you're doing. Because out here in the U.S., like, man, if you're going to pull a weapon to defend yourself, you better know how to use it, because not only are you putting yourself in danger, but there are other people around in those situations sometimes. And you want to make sure that if you are going to defend yourself, you're doing it in a responsible manner where you're not putting the lives of other people on the line. And again, when you look at, videos like you were talking about, some of the stuff I've seen, like on both sides, it's scary, right? Like, I've seen videos of active shooters who are now trained, and it looks like that they've had actual training. And so when they go into these schools or these markets, it's like, man, that's an actual threat. That's not just some guy who went unhinged and just had no training and went in and just blasted up the place, but actually was trained. And it's like, man, if there are threats out there that are getting training, how good do you have to be? How much training should you go through to overcome that, again, should the need arise? And unfortunately, that's just kind of the reality of the crazy world we live in nowadays. And so if you are going to step into that role of possibly, protecting yourself or your loved ones, right? Because I got family, I got a wife, I got kids. I want to make sure that, if anything ever happened, I'm there to make sure that they come out alive and unscathed. And I cannot do that if I'm not properly trained, like you said.
So Wyoming is not a conceal and carry permit state any longer. Up until 2021, it was.
We're a constitutional carry state, correct?
So that means that you're not required to have any training or license to carry in Wyoming, and that's great because that's one of our Second Amendment freedoms.
Yep.
And one of the things that we kind of talked about yesterday is, even though you don't need a conceal and carry, if you were going to go outside of the state or if you were going to open carry, you still need to know exactly what to do and how to use your firearm. And just because you don't have to have a permit doesn't mean that a little training doesn't go a long way.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And you're right. As far as the constitutional carry of the state, if you look at the law, which I believe is 6-8-104, because I do this when I do my concealed carry classes. I go through the legal aspect too. We're not required to have a permit in the state to either open or conceal carry, but I advocate people get the license just for the fact that I know a lot of us go out of state, right? We got the Dakotas right next door, Colorado, Montana, and those states do honor Wyoming's concealed carry permit, so that's not a bad idea. But I 100% agree with you. The fact that we have the right to carry a firearm in Wyoming to defend ourselves and our community is freaking awesome that the state recognizes that constitutional right. And I would suggest that with that right also comes the responsibility to know how to properly use it and properly and safely employ it should the need ever arise. And so I do advocate for training because, again, if you're going to use a firearm to defend yourself, there is so much that can go wrong, and you want to do everything you can and be as prepared as possible to mitigate any negative outcome. And so I highly advocate people get training. And I think that, from a personal standpoint, I think the founders understood that when they wrote the Second Amendment, that was a time where everybody had guns in their home. People were growing up with them, familiar with them. They used them all the time for hunting, for self-defense, for whatever. That was not uncommon. But what was also common during that time was people knowing what to do and knowing how to, use them. And I think that if people are going to really respect that right, they should be responsible in it and be trained up.
When you go into a class, a new class, you don't really know a lot of the people a lot of the times. You and I had met, we've talked and everything prior, so we kind of knew each other. But when people come in, how do you get to know what they know and really feel the clients out? Because, some you may need to finesse this way and some may need a little more info this way.
Right. So when I teach people, I start off with running them through the basics and kind of get an idea from there, like where they're at with their shooting capability. And then through the course, through teaching them shooting, if they're doing really well and they pick some skills up really quick, great, I'll pick up the pace a little bit. But there are some people who just need more time, and that's perfectly fine, right? Like, I'm there to make people confident with their firearm. And so if that takes a little bit more time working on some of the basic skills, that's absolutely fine. We'll do that. And through discussion of some of the tactical aspects that we've talked about, during the training, I get an idea of where they are, and maybe they have some, preconceived notions that are wrong through, like you said, YouTube videos or TV shows or Hollywood that they've watched. And I'm able to basically, give them some real life experience and be like, hey, like, maybe change your outlook a little bit, because I want people not just to be good at the skill of shooting, but also that tactical mindset. And in the Foundation to Victory course, which I would call my beginner's course, which I kind of put you through the other day, you started to get a taste of that introduction to a tactical mindset, right? In some of the things we talked about. And I think it's things that, I know you were learning, and there are some considerations that you hadn't even thought of that I'm able to bring to the table to really open people's eyes to what happens in a gunfight.
And that's where Cutting Edge comes in a lot. You having that military background where they are teaching anyone that goes into the military now the new tactics that you picked up then. And one of the first things was when we were shooting the AR, I got in the stance that normally would get in if I was going to shoot a rifle. And you're like, no, that's not how, we've progressed a little further and things now. And that's what you're going to learn.
Yeah. And that's something I have found out here in Wyoming, right, is I've talked to a lot of people who are telling me like, oh, well, my grandfather was a SEAL in Vietnam and he taught me everything he knows. And that's great. And there are some things in the shooting world that don't change, like the fundamentals of marksmanship, like trigger control, sight alignment, sight picture. Those things don't really change. But like you said, the way we stand, the way we hold rifles is different now. The way we bring up our rifle into our shoulder, there are just new things out there that I think could benefit a lot of people. And, that's just kind of the nature of the beast, right? With anything, like we were talking earlier about radio that you've been in for a while, and you've seen the changes in radio. And just like the firearms industry, like things change, and there's always room for improvement and for new tactics that people should be willing to try and willing to learn. And, with the stance, right? Like you had your elbow out when we were shooting, more of a traditional marksmanship stance when people are standing basically, offline to the side. And that does provide a very stable shooting platform if you're going to go hunting or do some long range precision shots. But it's not really conducive to a combat, moving and shooting, taking cover kind of firefight. And like you said, with the military experience, I bring a lot of that to the team training I do, because I do small unit tactics. But also my time doing private security allows me to speak to the situations in the U.S., because it's way different being in a combat zone overseas and then working within the U.S. and having to deal with different rules of engagement, if you will, and all the laws we have here that you need to know if you are going to defend yourself. You need to know that stuff. And I do go over that in my concealed carry course.
I think that, people need to have a little bit of training or knowledge about this. Over the years, we've had situations in schools and office buildings where, tragedy has come about there. But there were a lot of businesses that have now started offering these trainings, like you just said, the small security trainings or whatever, and knowing exactly what to do in a situation like that and not being afraid of the situation or the firearm that you're carrying, because confidence in that firearm is one of the important parts of it.
And one thing I talk about with my students, and I talked with you about this when we went out to the range, is when you get into a stressful situation, you revert back to the skill you last mastered, not the one you last learned. And so if I tell all my people, if you take one course from me and then you don't go home and you don't train on your own, you're not going to master that skill. So if something happens, you're going to revert back to just whipping your sidearm out and just shooting blindly, because you're not training enough to actually, tell your body, hey, in a stressful situation, this is what we do, right? We want to build that muscle memory, for lack of a better term, right? And we want to do enough training where that just becomes instinct, right? Like, I don't have to think about how to reload my handgun anymore, but that took years of running drills and loading it and reloading it and all that stuff to get it down to where it is muscle memory. And for some people, they think that should that need ever arise, they're just going to step up to the occasion. And unfortunately, that's not really the case if you don't have training. And I've seen that firsthand. You know, on one of my deployments, I remember we had a guy who his weapon went down. He had a pretty bad jam in the middle of an engagement, and he didn't train it enough. And so somebody else had to run over there and clear his weapon in the middle of an engagement.
Oh, man.
And it's like, man, that you just took yourself out of the fight because you didn't train enough to overcome that when it hit the fan and the stress came over you. And man, that can happen to anybody, you know? And so the best thing we can do to prepare is to train more, train hard, and continue to practice it. Because if you are going to step into that role of protecting yourself, your family, or your community, should the need ever arise, man, you got to be ready to do that. And you have to train hard in order to bring yourself to a level where you can come out successful and you can keep your loved ones safe.
So Mike and I spent just a couple of hours together, but he offers multiple levels of training, even the conceal and carry, which we mentioned you don't need in Wyoming, but you do need in other states. Mm-hmm. And it's great to have. Also, team training, and you've also got that one-on-one kind of tactical training and just firearms training. So
yep.
I encourage you to go check out the cettwy.com, which is the cutting edge tactics and training is broke down right there. But Mike, again, I appreciate you spending time with me this week, giving me some knowledge, giving me things to work on, and then coming on the show to spread the word.
Yeah, well, I thank you for having me on. It's a great opportunity to expand the business, and really my heart behind it is I want people to be prepared. I want people to stay safe, and I want them to be able to defend themselves. I was looking the other day, and man, the average police response time across the country is anywhere from 3 to 10 minutes. And guess what? Most violent encounters are done within seconds.
Right.
And so you don't have time sometimes, like, who are we going to rely on to defend ourselves? Well, it's got to be you. And so if that's something you care about, I'd encourage you, seek out training, come to Cutting Edge Tactics and Training, take a course. We're running one August 26th at Stuckenhoff. I'm putting on a Foundation to Victory course, an extended one. So that's just going to be 4 hours of really getting you into the saddle. You learn the fundamentals. We're going to drill those basics hard, and we're going to be brilliant in the basics. And I think that's a great first step for people who are learning, and also for people who have been shooting forever. Man, take the course, learn some new things, fine-tune some of those skills. I still go to training courses that people would consider basic because I understand the value of that. And so, yeah, again, thank you for having me on. I appreciate the opportunity to share what I'm doing, and hopefully, we can get some more people trained up and we can just live in a safer community.
Go check them out, cettwy.com.
Wyoming Hookin' Huntin' Outdoors with Drew Kirby. If you have a question, want to make a comment, or have an idea for a show topic, message us on the My Country mobile app. Wyoming Hookin' Huntin' Outdoors.